For over 30 years, a man named Serge Lifar achieved great renown both as a visionary artist and a gifted performer. To his contemporaries, he was a living symbol of dance, and to later generations of choreographers, a source of inspiration. But Lifar also went through dark years that tarnished his reputation. Who is the man behind the creator? And which secrets lie underneath this forgotten legend?
He was a very big name in his day. In a way, he was almost like a movie star. Any janitor in Paris could tell you about Serge Lifar, or at least knew who Serge Lifar was.
He really was an exceptional figure. Lively, creative, eager, but also kind of a socialite. There definitely was something special about him.
To an entire generation, although the word may be a bit strong, Lifar was like a god.
It's 1913, and no one can predict the impending World War I. An 8-year-old Lifar loves to read Pushkin and play the piano. He sometimes lays down on the riverbank that flows through Kyiv and daydreams about becoming a musician. A glorious, preordained future seems to lie ahead. World War I breaks out, shaking the foundations of the Russian Empire. Ukraine is occupied by the Bolsheviks and torn apart by a violent civil war. Serge Lifar's grandfather is arrested by the secret police, and his grandmother is burnt alive in the looting of their home. His family's belongings are seized, and his hand is wounded by shrapnel, which puts an end to his dreams of becoming a pianist. Serge Lifar's perfect world falls apart, and the teenager finds shelter in the forests outside of Kyiv to escape a most certain death. Russia's aim is to carry out an international revolution. Like all men of his age, Lifar is summoned aboard boats heading out to Poland. Lifar boards a ship, but beset by the thought of the love interest he left behind, he decides to desert the army and jump overboard in the middle of the night.
The boat he was on was hit by a bomb. Miraculously, he survived because he was already swimming to the bank and ultimately found his way home.
An idea resembling a prophecy makes its way into his mind. He believes he was spared in order to accomplish a mission. His near-death experience is like a resurrection whose baptism was his plunge. Serge Lifar discovers dance in 1920. On the day he accompanies a friend to the studio of Bronislava Nijinsky, sister of the great star of the Ballets Russes, Vaslav Nijinsky. Lifar instantly falls in love with ballet. He's carried away by the beauty of the moves and impressed by the discipline of the dancers, which contrasts with Ukraine's political turmoil. Finally, he understands his mission. He shall become a great dancer one day. From then on, nothing matters to Lifar except ballet. He steps on the path towards his destiny. To achieve his goal, Lifar must, first and foremost, follow Nijinsky's classes. But the teacher is skeptical about this idea. Although Lifar is graceful and has a strong, elegant body, he's already 16 years old, and his eagerness cannot make up for his lack of technique. He's first rejected for being too old, but finds a cunning way of taking the famous teacher's classes.
When the Soviet regime came into power, Bronislava Nijinsky was forced to teach in workers' clubs to anyone who wanted to learn ballet, or else she'd have her license taken away from her. So when she kicked Lifar out of her studio, he came back in his Red Army uniform. "What are you doing here?" she asked. That was when she was reminded that she had an obligation to teach him.
In the summer of 1921, Nijinsky leaves the country to go to Europe and join the Ballets Russes, a famous company bringing together the best dancers from St. Petersburg's Mariinsky Theatre. The company performs on stages all over the world, representing the leading edge of modernity.
Thanks to the Ballets Russes, Russian art dominated the world, but mostly the Russian school of dance.
After settling in with the Ballets Russes company, Bronislava Nijinsky sent an invitation to her top 5 students. Lifar didn't get invited. But at the last minute, one of the dancers backed out. So one of Lifar's friends told him he should join the company.
Serge Lifar's dream is finally within reach, but he has neither the money nor the papers required to travel to France. In order to leave the country, he devises a scheme worthy of the most epic adventure films.
He wore his Red Army uniform and took a gun with him. He suspected that the head of the police station at the border was a former Tsarist officer. So he said, "I know who you are. I'm from the secret police. Let me through the Polish border or you're under arrest." And he put his gun down on the table. Might I remind you that he was only 17 years old at the time?
Lifar's scheme works. He arrives in Paris in January 1923 at the age of 18. At the time, the Paris art scene is particularly vibrant in response to the horrors of World War I. The Ballets Russes company, directed by the very demanding Serge de Diaghilev, gathers packed theatres with its mind-blowing shows.
Diaghilev knew how important it was for the Ballets Russes to be successful, both on a commercial and an artistic level.
Diaghilev was a genius. He would bring together all kinds of artists, whether they were painters, composers, or writers, in order to create pieces.
He was also a dictator who went about giving people orders, complaining, or kicking out whoever he liked.
In the lobby of the Intercontinental Hotel, Serge Lifar rehearses a few moves in an attempt to loosen up. Along with the 4 other dancers invited by Nijinsky, he's finally about to meet Serge Diaghilev. The stakes are high. If Lifar wants to dance on stages across the world, he first needs the approval of the Ballets Russes' emperor.
When the 5 dancers showed what they were capable of, Diaghilev shouted at Bronislava, "Who do you think you invited over? Send them back to Kyiv. Except that boy. We should be able to get something out of him."
So this predator figure called Diaghilev immediately hires Lifar, who is 18 at the time.
How did an average dancer like Lifar manage to attract the attention of such a hard-to-please impresario? The answer lies in Serge Lifar's most potent asset, his very own weapon of mass seduction, his body.
Lifar was handsome. He had a splendid body.
He had exquisitely long, lean hands. I think everything was gorgeous about him. He had gorgeous legs, gorgeous feet.
He had this very distinctive olive skin and black hair. He was extraordinarily handsome.
Lifar was beauty incarnate. He had incredible charisma too.
One show in particular acts as a turning point in Serge Lifar's career. The show is called The Blue Train, a bold avant-garde piece with sets by sculptor Henry Lawrence and costumes by Gabrielle Chanel. Lifar's body is shown to his best advantage in the bathing suits designed by the famous fashion designer. Coco Chanel is said to have whispered in Diaghilev's ear, "Here is the dancer that you were looking for."
Diaghilev
took Lifar under his wing rather quickly, though perhaps not immediately. And Lifar realized it was to his advantage to stay close to the autocratic director of the Ballets Russes. He was like his protégé. Diaghilev really made Lifar, got him to refine his taste and artistic culture by taking him to museums, in Italy, for example.
Diaghilev would ask him to talk about what he had seen, how he felt about it, and so on. It's quite remarkable.
The two friends have another incentive to visit Italy often. In Turin, Lifar takes classes taught by a new teacher that Diaghilev introduced him to in the summer of 1924 in a resolute effort to help his protégé nurture his passion. His name is Enrico Cecchetti, and he is known as a magician who can turn his pupils into principal dancers.
Его называли маэстро. People in the field referred to him as maestro. He was a brilliant pedagogue. The particular thing was that his classes were very physical, and dancers made a lot of progress with him.
Serge Lifar's work with Cecchetti pays off, and the dancer gets his first lead role in a ballet called Zephyr and Flora. Unfortunately, Lifar pulls a muscle in his left leg during rehearsals. This injury comes as a real curse for the budding dancer, who is counting on this first big role to make a name for himself.
In order to dance regardless, he would immerse his leg in boiling water. The pain was unbearable, but he danced anyway. Even Nijinsky and the other dancers were impressed.
Serge Lifar continues his meteoric rise to fame. Diaghilev believes, however, that the dancer's snub nose doesn't catch the light properly. The well-wishing mentor thus offers his protégé one last present, a new nose.
He underwent face surgery. So, in 1925, after this wonderfully successful operation, Lifar had a splendid face and essentially became as handsome as a dancer could get.
Following this fine remodeling, Lifar's body becomes an accomplished piece of art, embodying an aesthetic ideal. For his contemporaries, Serge Lifar is an object of fascination. He is painted, sculpted, and bombastically described by the press and great 20th century artists alike. Serge Lifar achieves great renown and becomes a real socialite with all of high society revolving around him. His friends include Paul Valéry, Jean Cocteau, Coco Chanel, and Pablo Picasso, the kind of people who spur artistic revolutions. With the budding star getting more and more parts, could his special relationship with Diaghilev have contributed to this meteoric rise?
Lifar's charisma, technique, and stage presence were the reasons why Diaghilev entrusted him with lead parts. It wasn't just because of the personal relationship that they had. Lifar didn't steal any of those parts. He got them because he had the talent required to do them.
Serge Lifar's name is on the rise when a genius choreographer, Georges Balanchine, takes over the leadership of the Ballets Russes. Balanchine, who later went on to become a major figure of ballet dancing, decides to make the most out of Serge Lifar's talent.
Even though Balanchine didn't really get along with Lifar, he was the first one to say, "I used him for his innate sense of beautiful postures." So he knew how to show off his body. In the 1930s, some would ironically say, Mr. Lifar is slowly moving towards complete nudity because of the way he overexposed his body. In reality, though, the Ballets Russes had already started this trend, since dancers had no problem dancing bare-legged in the 1920s.
In 1929, under Diaghilev's direction, Lifar created his first choreography based on a composition by Stravinsky called Renard.
The young prodigy's first creation is based on Russian folk tales. It's performed in Paris and London and wins the acclaim of audiences. A few months later, Diaghilev passes away. During the funeral in Venice, Serge, melodramatic as always, pretends to throw himself in the grave. But something new is about to boost the young choreographer's career. Balanchine, who is to produce a new ballet commissioned by the Paris Opera, is stricken with acute pneumonia.
He was sick, so he told management, "You should take Serge Lifar instead." This is how Lifar got there at a very young age.
Lifar joins the Paris Opera and never loses his great admiration for it. To him, it's the greatest opera house in the world. Being there is his pride and joy.
At age 25, a mere 10 years after the start of his career, Serge Lifar becomes a ballet master in one of the greatest opera houses in the world, the Paris Opera. He vows to dedicate his life to ballet, which at the time is still an old-fashioned institution. Now, Lifar has the power to revolutionize it.
One of Lifar's achievements was to bring male dancers back to the forefront by giving them lead roles.
This was a major step forward. Male dancers gained considerable importance when Lifar came in.
Serge Lifar gives new shape to the world of dance and pursues the work started by Diaghilev, to whom ballet was the beating heart of all other arts. And of course, dance itself.
He brought with him the style of the Ballets Russes, which was a rather acrobatic, athletic and angular style.
Dance needs a major makeover. Not only is it old-fashioned, but its development is stifled by a lack of performances.
When Lifar joined the Paris Opera, there were no evenings entirely dedicated to ballets. The audience came to see operas and ballets, but it was very rare to dedicate an entire evening to just ballet. So Lifar imposed a weekly ballet night from 1935 onwards.
So he demanded 2 nights out of the week, which were on Wednesdays and Fridays. Then he had the entire month of July become ballet month.
Lifar had a very strong ally on his side, which was the economic slump. Dance is always less expensive than opera.
The country goes through difficult times. More and more French people lose their jobs following the 1929 stock market crash. Critics begin denouncing the high number of Russian nationals at the Paris Opera. Tensions flare up.
It's important to keep in mind what the context was back then. First of all, Lifar wasn't French, he was stateless. In Paris, people treated him like a foreigner. This was the 1930s, a time when leagues, far-right and fanatical groups were taking over. Lifar represented the outsider.
In spite of this hostile climate, Lifar manages to stage a show that secures his position at the opera. The show is Icarus, or Icarus, a project that the choreographer has been contemplating for years. Drawing on the myth of Icarus, the ballet tells the story of a winged man soaring towards the sun. The ballet is a mirror of its time, since civil aviation then is in full bloom. The press recounts the exploits of pilots like Charles Lindbergh, who has just crossed the Atlantic, or Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who writes novels about his flights to Africa.
This ballet, which was created in 1936, exemplifies modernity. Icarus is almost naked with the exception of maybe a few accessories and wings on his back and so on. And this was really revolutionary at the time. Serge Lifar composed both the dance and the music. He would carry a key and mark the beats with it. Then when he gave those beats to Honegger to turn them into music, this was all done in percussions. This was also revolutionary.
For Lifar, a choreographer needs to think up his choreography first, before the other arts can come in. There is a form of power struggle in which dance must keep precedence. He believed that dance always comes first.
He once told me that dance was mankind's very first art. So I answered, "Master, don't you think it's perhaps music?" He said, "No, it's dance. Movement."
In Icarus, he manages to win the approval of his critics by playing a hero who ends up losing his bet and dying. It's quite daring.
Lifar truly is a superstar, and this idol status is typical of those modern times. As an egocentric socialite constantly overexposing his body, Serge Lifar is like an early pop celebrity with an irresistible force of attraction.
He would announce his projects publicly. Imagine the Times dedicating half a page to a choreographer writing about his next piece today. This is how famous he was.
He loved being photographed, and he loved the company of politicians and artists as well.
Being the object of such intense admiration naturally puffed up his ego. When he created Prometheus, he got into a fight with the conductor because he wanted to add a chord to the music. He was told, "No, you can't mess with Beethoven's score." And he said, "Beethoven was famous, but Lifar is too."
Except for Icarus, Serge Lifar's innovative pieces received mixed reviews. But even though the criticism is sometimes harsh, it only matters on an artistic level. However, World War II is about to change everything, making any criticism all the more dangerous. The Paris Opera House goes through a period of uncertainty. Many dancers are called up following the general mobilization of September 3rd, 1939. But thankfully, this mobilization doesn't affect foreign artists. Thanks to the Nansen passport he was given a few years earlier, Serge Lifar is exempted from military service. Serge Lifar continues to dance and choreograph. From January to March 1940, he goes on tour in Australia, where he performs The Spirit of the Rose, Swan Lake, and Icarus. Never had anyone seen a dancer such as Lifar, a performer so athletic, fierce, and expressive. The most important shows conclude with over 25 curtain calls. Serge Lifar makes the headlines in the Australian press. People from Melbourne to Sydney rave about him. In 1940, Nazi Germany extends its domination over Europe, occupying northern France before finally reaching Paris. In the heart of the capital, the graceful gait of Lifar's dancers are superseded by the heavy stamp of German boots. Shortly after Lifar's return to France and the signature of the armistice of June the 22nd, 1940, the city of Paris entrusts Lifar with a considerable task: to put the Paris Opera back in business in order to keep the Germans from occupying the building.
The opera had to go on. Artists and musicians had to go on performing. Singers had to go on singing, and so on. Keeping art alive. That was Lifar's main goal.
He stayed there to save the Paris Opera, because the Nazis not only wanted to destroy it, but they wanted to take Lifar to Berlin to create a dance school and ballet company there.
Lifar enters a difficult period in his life. He has no choice but to compromise with the Germans occupying the capital, and receives his first visit from Nazi propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels at the Paris Opera. Then comes Hitler's turn to visit the opera house during a trip to Paris. The Führer enters the building at 7 in the morning. Lifar is informed of the dictator's visit and decides not to show up to work that morning. The people, however, are not aware of Lifar's absence. Instead, they believe the choreographer is fraternizing with the enemy. The country, traumatized by the arrival of German troops, grows distrustful of Serge Lifar. Only a few months later, in 1941, does Serge Lifar actually meet the dictator. The meeting takes place in an office in Adolf Hitler's headquarters.
Hitler invited Lifar to Berlin and asked him to create a great ballet, an epic, choreographed piece celebrating the glory of the Third Reich. Lifar refused.
The people of Paris throw accusations at Lifar. But this apparently friendly relationship with the enemy may not be what it seems. Fixated on their racist ideals, the Germans become suspicious regarding Lifar's origins. Like many other artists, he is asked to provide an Aryan certificate.
For a long time, Lifar was accused of being Jewish. Certain members of the SS were after him because they had heard things like, Lifar has a Jewish face, and so on. In the end, he managed to get rid of those accusations and prove that he wasn't Jewish. His brother testified on his behalf, and he had face and blood analyses done.
Free from any suspicion, Serge Lifar goes on with his mission at the Paris Opera House. The young prodigy doesn't mind taking care of everything and wears several hats. He is a manager, but also a janitor, a sweeper, a switchboard operator, an electrician, a dancer, a choreographer, and of course, a ballet master.
Mais il souhaitait une mort très rapide. Oui.
Il est mort très rapidement.
Ah, mais ça, en une seconde, il a été escamoté.
With the help of his great friend Jean Cocteau, Lifar reintroduces what the French referred to as dance poems. Even though Cocteau finds the choreographer a bit superficial, the two artists share a similar kind of eccentricity. During the war, whenever they need to work together past curfew, Lifar hums the Scheherazade tune under Cocteau's window. In only 4 years, Lifar choreographs 12 ballets, including 6 new creations. At the performances, usually half of its audience is made up by soldiers or commanders of the German army.
When I joined the ballet, all the Germans sat in the orchestra section, forming a kind of big green carpet. We had no choice but to dance to make sure the show went on, since they'd reopened the theatre for their own enjoyment.
After the shows, Serge Lifar meets up with the high-ranking German officers in the best restaurants of Paris, such as Maxime's or La Pérouse. On the surface, everything about Lifar makes him seem like a supporter of the Reich. He regularly shares fine meals with the Nazis, whom he also entertains with his shows.
Not everyone wished him well. So some people immediately labeled him as a collaborator. But in a way, I think we were all collaborators. Even I was on my own small scale because I did all the shows.
During the occupation, there is more to Lifar than this social life that people enjoy gossiping about. Through much more discreet but noble actions, he proves to be a generous and compassionate man who is participating in the war effort by first helping his dancers at the Paris Opera.
He did a lot for the dancers, even during the war. There were issues with Jewish dancers, for instance, whom he hid. He also saved many male dancers from military duty, with the excuse that if they were taken away, there simply wouldn't be any more ballet performances.
Serge Lifar also sends substantial amounts of money to multiple organizations supporting prisoners and young victims of the war. The funds are collected during the innumerable galas that Lifar takes part in. In these difficult economic times, the dancer and choreographer does what he can to help serve the needs of the French people. And that is by putting his love into his art.
He really wanted ballet to get public recognition. He wanted to make it accessible to mainstream audiences and explain that it was an art equivalent to music, drama, writing, or literature.
A man's homeland is wherever he prospers. For Lifar, this was the studio or the stage.
Attracted by the glam and glitter of parties and receptions, Serge Lifar flits about and strikes up friendships with celebrities of his caliber, such as Josephine Baker, or the Third Reich's forefront artists, such as sculptor Arno Breker. Serge Lifar composes his most famous ballet, Suite en Blanc, in 1943, as a form of reaction to the world around him. Today, the ballet is still performed by the world's greatest dance companies. But at the time, it is a way for Lifar to thumb his nose at the Nazi regime, firmly asserting his commitment to freedom and elegance.
I distinctly remember Lifar saying, Suite en Blanc is a gem. It has to be performed by the greatest dancers on the planet. There isn't much of a plot. It's what the French call a white ballet, but it features many solo variations, dances of 2, 3, 5 people, thought through in minute detail. This is the strength of this ballet.
Suite en Blanc is the quintessential example of the neoclassical ballet style introduced by the Ballets Russes. This style of dance, which is intrinsically associated with Serge Lifar's name, moves away from the linear narratives of 19th century ballet. It incorporates angular shapes and very expressive broken articulations.
This was his most important idea as a choreographer, the one where he went past academic conventions.
This distinctive position of the dancer, with an arm presented on the side, with a slightly tilted head and an unaligned body, that's immediately associated with Lifar's style. Whether you're feeling sad, angry, or joyful, this position is a basis for everything. It can take you wherever you need to go to express yourself. And it's pleasing to the eye, too.
Suite en Blanc is mostly known for its cigarette variation, which the audience always enjoys, because it's very beautiful and a very demanding dance.
Suite en Blanc is performed abroad during the occupation. In the fall of 1943, on November 27th and 28th, at the Berlin Deutsches Opernhaus, 2 performances are given by Lifar and other dancers from the Paris Opera Ballet, such as Serge Peretti, Yvette Chauvirey, and Solange Schwartz. Serge Lifar meets the dictator for the second time.
He told me that the piercing eyes of Hitler when he stared at somebody made a strong impression on him.
This meeting strikes another blow to Lifar's reputation, but his relationship with Sonia Olinska, one of the Gestapo's so-called countesses, destroys it for good. Lifar is indeed seen at one of Olinska's receptions, walking arm in arm with her, wearing the German uniform.
Lifar wasn't a very cautious person. Based on what I've found in my research, I don't believe he was ever an active collaborator per se, but maybe more of a passive one. He was honored and invited to events, but that's all.
Radio Londres, a major player in the French resistance, vehemently attacks the choreographer for his behavior. A judgment is passed. Serge Lifar is sentenced to death both by the Free French and the Gestapo, illustrating how ambivalent he was at the time, with both sides seeing him as the enemy.
The Germans came as conquerors. What could he have done? Where could he have gone? He was stateless. What mattered was saving his company and its opera house.
In 1944, the balance of power shifts in favor of Free France and its allies. Paris is freed in August, and the hunt for collaborators is launched. France must be purged of traitors. Unlike other people who get executed without a trial, Serge Lifar is granted the right to a court hearing.
When we look at the Purge committee today, we might find it a little funny because it was made up of the less qualified people at the Paris Opera who just went about deciding other people's fates.
The verdict is in. The Purge committee permanently bans Lifar from the Paris Opera and all state theatres. A form of organized collective amnesia sets in. Lifar's works are removed from the Paris Opera Ballet's repertoire, and his name is erased from the posters of the already programmed performances. Then, in May 1945, a battle begins regarding Lifar's reinstatement. Letters and leaflets of both support and condemnation fly from all sides. The two sides who sat face to face during Serge Lifar's so-called trial confront each other once again.
The events of the war and the fact that Lifar was accused of being a collaborator still carried a certain weight. Technicians in particular were reluctant to let him back in.
We started a movement against the technicians who didn't want Lifar back at the opera. But we won and we got him back. This was a big fight that the greatest dancers of the time took part in. Our movement expressed our passion for ballet through the figure of Serge Lifar.
The famous choreographer is heard by the Purge Committee once more. A certificate dated June the 19th, 1946, reveals that the story of Hitler being received at the Paris Opera House was made up. After reconsideration, Lifar's sentence is brought down to 1 year with retroactive effect. On November the 1st, 1945, Serge Lifar is thus free to resume his work on French soil, but on two conditions: that he neither dances nor bows to the audience after performances.
All the main and principal dancers wanted their ballet master back because he gave them roles through which they earned a living. Back then, we were still performing old traditional ballets, and we wanted to do something different. We wanted Lifar to come back and choreograph for us. We weren't after the dancer, but the master.
Serge Lifar leaves the new Monte Carlo Ballet Company, which he had joined in 1945, and goes back to the Paris Opera, though only as a ballet master. The rumour spreads throughout the building. Something is in the air. The master has returned.
He was my master and everyone's master. The word matters because no one even gets to be called a master today.
Quand vous voyez rentrer un personnage,
I remember him walking into the studio like a nobleman, with his very distinctive gait
qui n'était pas quelconque,
and his slicked-back ebony hair.
Noir, ébène comme ça.
He would give off a particular feeling that I couldn't describe to you exactly. There was this hard-to-define kind of aura surrounding him.
Qu'il avait quand il arrivait.
When Serge Lifar walked into a rehearsal studio, a sense of respect instantly filled the room. A sense of generosity. He walked in with a score under his arm, since he had an ear for music. Seeing him always energized us.
Attitude, arabesque, expression, pointe, serrer les pointes.
In the studio of the Paris Opera House, where he teaches classes, Lifar focuses on the technical work, which he values a great deal. He likes complex positions and virtuosity. Also, performers must always stay in sync with the music and make one with it, or else they will get into serious trouble.
He would get angry at times. I'd hear him stomp his feet and shout, "Damn it! Shut up! Damn it!"
He'd constantly scold dancers who weren't in sync with the music. And he would swear at them. "Damn it, Granny, why don't you go and dance in Angoulême?" In his mind, this French town was the worst place to be for artists.
In 1947, Serge Lifar creates Les Mirages, a fairy tale-like ballet in one act and two scenes.
Lifar liked telling stories. He was a narrative choreographer.
He believed that the purpose of dance was to tell stories. All of Lifar's ballets, except Suite en Blanc, have narratives.
This ballet of surrealist and romantic inspiration tells the story of the relationship between a man and his shadow, which he abandons to travel to the moon and follow his dreams of love and glory. In the end, he comes back to his shadow after realizing that his dreams were mere illusions.
The curtain fell at 11:30 p.m. and they went back to the rehearsal studio at midnight. They reworked the piece until 2 in the morning. That's the rigor of great dancers, their eagerness to work hard.
On February the 2nd, 1949, Serge Lifar is back on stage as a dancer at the Paris Opera House. His return has a symbolic value. He is 44, a rather advanced age in the practice of such a demanding activity, which calls for flexibility, technique, and physical strength. One could say that the last 6 years of his career has been quite a struggle.
Serge Lifar
danced for as long as he could.
De ses possibilités. Peut-être.
I'd say he even overdid it. trop, leaving an impression of him that maybe didn't fully correspond to who he was.
Le personnage qu'il était.
People were still telling him he was wonderful, so he still believed that he was. This is truly regrettable because we kept telling him, Master, you shouldn't do this, Master, you shouldn't dance that, but he simply would not understand.
On December the 5th, 1956, Lifar bids farewell to the national stage. He dances the part of Albrecht in Giselle, partnered by Yvette Chauvirey. The performance is a triumph, and Lifar is called back 12 times on stage at the Paris Opera House. People applaud the dancer, his career, his audacity, his talent, his devotion, and his longevity. However, some criticize him for retiring so late from the stage.
Ici, j'ai passé les plus grands moments de joie de ma vie. Toute ma vie de la création est passée sous ces murs. Et puis, naturellement, j'ai eu de hauts mouvements de joie, de reconnaissance, de l'admiration. Et en même temps, j'ai eu des jours de complot.
2 years later, after several fits of anger thrown at her pride, Lifar is dismissed from the Paris Opera as a ballet master.
After someone has spent 30 years in one institution, people start wondering what they're still doing there. I think that at some point we had had enough. Management and ballet masters had had enough. But maybe dancers too were tired of working with the same person all the time. They needed a change. They wanted something different.
He remained active for a very long time. But unfortunately, French people are not very loyal. They're very fickle, always changing their minds, and they were tired of Lifar. They wanted something different. Plus, young new choreographers were arriving on the scene.
In France, Lifar's successors, or at least the choreographers who became famous after him, were naturally Roland Petit and Maurice Béjart. Roland Petit doesn't acknowledge this at all. He speaks very ill of Lifar, even though Lifar was initially the one to reveal him as a dancer. Maurice Béjart, however, has always openly acknowledged this.
Lifar was the one to inspire these two men to become choreographers. I remember Roland Petit saying that Lifar's ballets were outdated, that watching them had become impossible. Still, he drew a lot of inspiration from those ballets.
People consider Béjart's Rite of Spring to be revolutionary because Béjart had dancers wearing flesh-colored leggings and so on, but Lifar had already done that.
When Lifar left the Paris Opera after his contract came to an end, he went through a very difficult period. I think it was in a newspaper that he said, "I've been guillotined." This departure felt like a beheading to him. Being away from the stage, backstages and studios of the Paris Opera, all this felt like a form of death.
That opera house had been the place of amazing triumphs and achievements for him, so he was very attached to it. Plus, he practically lived there, since he arrived at 8 in the morning and left at midnight every day.
He lost his beloved home, and by the same token, the practice of his art. So he sought refuge in filmmaking and writing books. He also met with young dancers and helped them if he could.
While the world of dance loses interest in Lifar, newspapers, on the other hand, continue reporting his every move. In 1958, Serge Lifar pulls his last and most brilliant media stunt.
Serge Lifar, décidé à effacer dans le sang une gifle reçue en public au théâtre des Champs-Élysées. Attiré par le fracas des armes, une foule de journalistes tenait l'emploi du chœur antique dans cette tragédie en forme de pas de deux.
Lifar accuses the Marquis de Cuevas of having plagiarized his Suite en Blanc ballet, presenting it at the Champs-Élysées Theatre under a barely modified name, Noir et Blanc. Lifar confronts the Marquis about this and receives a slap in the face in response. Not wearing gloves, Lifar throws his napkin instead and demands a duel. Cuevas is 73 and Lifar 54.
We walked out of rehearsals, only to find a photographer or a journalist standing there going, "Mr. Lifar, master, please, would you tell us what's happening? How are things going?" He'd turn to me and say, "Go get my accessories." So I'd go to the prop room and come back with a sword or a foil, and he would strike a pose with it and say, "I will pierce Marquis like a butterfly and send a telegram saying, 'Marquis, New York, come get body.'"
L'instant était proche. Serge Lifar s'était muni d'un certain nombre de fétiches. Gants de cuir, chaussons et icônes, car un mauvais coup est vite arrivé. Puis...
The Marquis said, "Now watch me run him through," and he ripped a several centimetre long gash on Lifar's left arm. From what Lifar told me, the Marquis then broke into tears and said, "I killed my son. I killed the god of dance."
Serge Lifar reçut les soins qu'exigeait son état. Le marquis de Cuevas soupira qu'il avait cru percer son propre fils. Grâce au ciel, tout finit par des entrechats.
Deprived of his passion, Lifar's mood takes a turn for the worse. He continues to promote the art of dance, but his enthusiasm is not what it used to be. 30 years of glory were not enough to quench his thirst for recognition and his need to express himself. But one Swedish countess, Lilian Arlefelt, is about to come into his life to give him all the support he needs.
I think Lilian Arlefelt was rapidly seduced by this mysterious character, who was still very handsome, very famous, passionate and fascinating. I think she was like a guardian angel to him. Lifar was a sensitive man. He was prone to stress, just like any other artist. And Lilian was like a shelter to him. He would go to her in order to calm down. To cut him off from his Parisian environment, Lilian first moved him to Cannes. Then many years later, she moved him to Switzerland. In a way, it was important to her to have him for herself.
One day, he phoned me and he said, "I'm on the terrace at the Countess's villa." And I asked him what he was doing. And he said, "I'm sweeping the floor with a ballet, which is the French homonym for broom." So in a sorrowful voice he said, "I'm still a ballet master."
Le danseur et chorégraphe Serge Lifar est décédé à l'âge de 81 ans la nuit dernière à Lausanne. Le ministre François Léotard rend hommage ce soir au dernier grand chorégraphe issu des Ballets Russes de Diaghilev. Et M. Léotard souhaite que l'opéra maintienne l'œuvre de Lifar et présente ses meilleurs ouvrages.
On visitait ensemble.
We were visiting Egypt together.
En Égypte.
And we went to see a tomb.
Et on était
We stared at the excavated grave.
Devant l'excavation.
And then we both sat down.
Et alors,
and I said, "Master, this is where you belong."
Elle est ici.
And he said, "You think so, Labis? You really think so?" It was like he'd suddenly become a pharaoh. Part of him had never stopped being a child.
Gamin, en fait.